Hey guys, it's Chris from Highline Guitars, and you're watching episode 118 of From the Luthier's Workbench. In this episode, I'm going to talk about what's on my workbench. Well, at least one of the projects that I have on one of my workbenches. I actually have a couple of workbenches. I've got a table for my CNC machine, a table for my joiner, my drill press, and my planer. And I've got a couple of rolling work stands. One has my belt sander and my oscillating spindle sander, and then I've got another one that has my buffing wheel and my grinder on it. So I've got all these different tables. Most of them are on casters, so I can roll them around, which works great since I have such a limited space to work in. This is the bench that I use a lot, and it's really not the most efficient bench. It's not big enough, and it's a little bit too low. So what I'm thinking about doing down the road is I'm going to build a new bench which will take the place of my two workbenches. And it's going to be a little bit higher. It's going to have storage space. But that's for a future episode. Hopefully that'll take place before next spring and summer. Anyway, the project that I'm currently working on is a new guitar design which I have been working on my computer at least for a couple of weeks, and I've just now taken the work that I did on the computer and I've translated it into an actual guitar project. And what this is a single cutaway guitar design, and I'm calling this one the Highline Bravo. And I'm also working on a double cutaway design which I'll be calling the Highline Echo, but that's for a future episode. And what I'd like to do is just kind of bring you in a little closer and show you some of the features of this design that I've incorporated. It's all based on things that I've learned and ideas that I've formulated. So let me bring you in a little closer and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So as I began designing this guitar, I wanted to incorporate a couple of features which I had been thinking about for a while that would help to reduce some of the costs, simplify construction, but yet result in a really nice guitar. And one of the features that I added to this guitar is I'm calling it a partial carved top. Or maybe I'll call it a half carved top. I don't know. We'll have to think that one through for marketing purposes. But what I've done is I've got a bevel that's carved just on the upper half of the body. It could, if I wanted to, I could have had it run around the bottom side as well, which would give me more of a symmetrical carved top design. But I decided to omit that for a couple of reasons. First of all, I'm trying to move away from always doing things in a symmetrical way, because let's face it, guitars are not as symmetrical as we might like to think they are. And that's especially true with the single cutaway design. The top half does not mirror the bottom half. And oftentimes we angle things, and that's sort of eliminates the whole idea of perfect symmetry in the design. So I wanted to kind of step away from that whole approach of doing things in a symmetrical fashion. But another reason, and probably a more important reason, is if I were to continue that bevel all the way around, it would double the amount of time necessary to CNC that bevel. And because I still have to do sanding to get everything nice and smooth, that would double the amount of time necessary to sand. So because time is money, it would just increase the cost of the guitar in the long run. Now, another concern I had with continuing this bevel all the way around to the bottom half of the guitar is that I'd have to be really careful about how the control cavity interacts with the bevel. If I made the cavity too deep, there's always a possibility that this edge here would actually pop through the bevel. So to simplify the construction, I just eliminate that bevel on this side, and that allows me to keep the control cavity to all one depth, which in this case runs to the back of the 5/8 inch thick flame maple top. And then all I have to do is use long shaft pots, which is what I normally use on my guitars. And then where the switch is going to be installed, and it'll be a 3-way toggle, I'll just countersink this area here so that the toggle switch can fit all the way through the hole and the nut can grab it at the top. Another feature with this guitar is I have done an easy access carve here, which will make it easier to grab onto those upper frets on the neck. And I've also done a slight comfort contour, which should hopefully make the guitar a little bit more comfortable when it's resting up against the body. You see that a lot on guitars, especially like Stratocasters, even Telecasters. I'm also doing for this run, I'm going to be doing a set-in neck instead of the bolt-in necks like I've been doing on the Apollyon and the Osiris. And the reason why I'm doing a set-in neck as opposed to a bolt-in, well, there's actually two reasons. First of all, set-in necks have a higher perceived value. And some of you may disagree with that, but I would ask you to take a look at how the Gibson and Epiphones, how they price the Les Paul guitars. The higher-end Gibson Les Pauls are all set-in necks, whereas the lower-priced Epiphone version of the Les Pauls, you can actually get them with bolt-in necks. So bolt-in necks tend to have a lower perceived value than a set-in neck, which I think is kind of funny because in my opinion, the set-in neck is easier to execute. With both a bolt-in and set-in neck, you have to route the pocket, and then you have to route the shape of the heel. With the set-in neck, the next step is just to apply some glue, and then you would press it in, clamp it, let it dry. However, with a bolt-in neck, you have some added steps. You have to drill holes for the bolts or the wood screws, and those holes have to go through the body and into the neck heel. Then you have to install it using hardware, which is, of course, your screws, a neck plate, or if, in this case, since it's an all-access heel, I'd have to countersink a couple of holes for ferrules, and then I could install the neck with the wood screws. And then, of course, if you're doing threaded inserts, you have to drill the back of the heel to accept those threaded inserts. And all of that takes extra time. So not only are there more steps involved, but there's also the expense of added hardware. So in my opinion, and it's always been my experience, that set-in necks are easier to do than bolt-in and cheaper. So by doing it this way, I'm getting the best of both worlds. I'm simplifying the process. I'm making it easier for me to assemble it. Yet I'm still going to be able to enjoy the higher perceived value of a set-in neck. Obviously, you can tell that this guitar will be equipped with humbuckers, and of course I'll wind those up myself. And I'm thinking about maybe doing some single coils somewhere down the road. Maybe I'll do a P90 version of the Bravo, and then my double cutaway version, the Echo, I'm thinking about doing some Strat style single coils, and we'll see. It just depends on what I'm intrigued by and what I think would be a cool approach to a new design. Now, another thing I'm going to do here, and I forgot to do this when I was building the files for the carved top, is I'm going to scallop this shape here. So I'll probably just do that by hand with my Iwasaka files, but in the future I'll modify my G-code file so that I can have that scallop machined into the top when I'm actually doing the CNC work. So last but not least is the finish. And I've got an idea about how I'm going to do this finish. And I can't really go into the specifics. I'll save that for a future episode. What I will say is that from start to finish, it's all going to be water-based. So I encourage you to stay tuned and see how that proceeds, because it's going to use some new products that have come out, and I think it should be really interesting. But before I reveal exactly what that process is going to be, I want to test it, see how it works, get a feel for it, and then I'll actually video the process being done to this guitar. But with this flame maple top, it should look really nice. Okay, so that's all the time I got for this week's episode, and I'm sure that in future episodes I'll be continuing to update you on the progress for the Highline Guitars Bravo build, and we'll see how that goes. So until then, I hope you have a great weekend, a great week ahead, and be sure to hit the like button, and if you don't already subscribe and want to follow along on the progress on all my future builds, hit that subscribe button. And if you have any comments or questions, of course, post those below. And I always try to answer all the questions that come up. And I try to do so without being too snarky, but I can't promise anything. So until the next episode, take care and we'll see you soon.